So in this video I'm going to talk about how I set up to compress my irons. It's something that a lot of amateur golfers that reach out for help, students of mine, have difficulty with ball striking, and actually understanding a couple of things to do with the setup and also with the swing makes a massive difference, and that's why I want to share it really with you guys as well. So if we talk about the stance first, what we're going to want to do is we want a nice wide stance. Okay, so if you grab yourself a couple of alignment sticks and you were to hold them on the instep of your ankle line, you want to make sure it falls on your hip line, similar to what I'm demonstrating here. Now, the reason why this is so important is in the golf swing, we have to be able to move actually from right to left. And what tends to happen with most amateurs is they end up with a very narrow stance, which actually encourages you to sort of slide around more than you would think it would. So actually having a wider stance gives you the ability to rotate with inside this gateway that we're going to talk about shortly. So get yourself a couple of alignment sticks. First of all, you would use it just to check your width of stance. And then what you can do is you can place them on the floor so they're in line with either of your ankles. So once you've got your gateway set up, it's probably worthwhile just bringing it in about an inch so that your ankles don't knock the gateway each time and you have to keep resetting it. But what you've now created is a nice wide stance that you can use in that setup position, but also we've created a gateway of our rotation. So there's a couple of other things that are really going to help our ball striking out. Avoiding any excessive tilt is key. I tend to see a lot of golfers that move too much this way. What I would suggest in your setup position is just put your lead hand and just kind of make sure that you can reach down to your knee when you're in your setup position. So if you're kind of very excessively tilted and you can't kind of comfortably reach down. So the way if I get set up here, the way I can just get my lead hand on my knee. That's a real sort of simple tip to make sure that you feel like you're over the golf ball in that setup position. Aside from that, always my tips are flare that lead foot out slightly and just make sure that the handle of the golf club would live on the instep of the thigh if you were to let go of the club. Avoiding anything like this and being more this way is again going to help us deal off the club, which is going to give us that sort of feeling of compression. Now what we need to do, now we have a decent setup, is talk about the backswing position. So the whole point of having this gateway here is that we want to make sure that we're rotating within it, particularly in the backswing position. So if I put the club across my shoulders here and I just try and concentrate on getting a feeling of a nice rotation, and you could practice this in front of the mirror as you see in your gateway. See the way that I stay within inside this gateway. What I mean by this is I don't excessively slide and I don't allow my head to move. Now, one of the things that's a feeling in my golf swing, particularly when I'm trying to really compress my irons, is it's less about rotation. I actually feel a little bit more like I'm just sort of lifting my arms up into a position like so. This way I feel like I can keep my hands in front of me, and that's going to help my hands stay in front of me on the way down. I tend to see golfers get a little bit too trapped and then your arms get too stuck. So you want to first of all practice your rotation, staying with inside the gateway, but then second, maybe just play around with the feeling of lifting your arms into a position, because you might find, like for a lot of my students, that's kind of like a little sneaky tip. So once we're in the backswing position, the key thing to do now is to start the downswing correctly. And what I want you to try and get the feeling of is as you start the downswing, that you're just pulling the lead hip back in line with this ankle line. So if you've rotated correctly in the backswing, similar to what I'm demonstrating here, your hip would have come in slightly from that ankle line. And then as I start my downswing, as I go to rotate, whilst re-establishing weight back into my lead leg, you see the way my hip moves back over towards that alignment stick. As I'm doing this, I can simultaneously kind of allow my arms to drop so that my hands are moving over the golf ball, which again is going to be a key skill for learning how to compress. Getting a good backswing position and then starting the downswing similar to what I'm demonstrating here is going to be absolutely fundamental to your ability to learn how to actually hit the golf ball whilst maintaining compression. So I would suggest work on that backswing, and then you just want to get the feeling of pulling this lead hip back while simultaneously, from your perspective, feeling like the lead hip moves back over towards that line. That's going to move you in a nice way over the ball, but also triggering rotation. That's a key thing, which is then going to give you the possibility to do the grand finale. When I've done this sort of drill with a lot of students, the perspective thing is always a little bit funny. They never look down and see this sort of gateway that's being created. Now, again, golfers that are quite poor in terms of ball striking, their arms get trapped and they get too stuck. So what happens in the hitting zone is that they end up having to sort of move the head to chase through, which is why the arms always end up very bent and crooked. What we're trying to do is similar to that second phase. If we're in a downswing position where we're pulling the lead hip back and the arms are in front of the body, is we actually want to keep our head back and actually look a little bit more this way where the arms are going straighter as we're clearing the hips. And that's where, again, that gateway really comes into its own. Because what I want you to have as a visual and a feeling is as I start this downswing, my weight would be predominantly on that lead side. So from here, what I want to do is I want to keep rotating, but it will feel like my lead hip moves further back. So it's almost like my pelvis comes back in the actual gateway itself, which will then mean as I keep my head still in the gateway, I can extend my arms through. And that's going to give us that ability to kind of, I would say, shallow out the hit. It's kind of like what's happening with this club is we're setting it into a position, we're bringing it down, and then when we come into the hip, that grip needs to whip up and through, which helps that club swing through. It's this type of motion here, which again is going to be absolutely fundamental to your ability to compress the ball. So by understanding the importance of this gateway, rotating in the backswing, using it to shift pressure correctly, and then again staying within the gateway as you swing your arms through, is going to make a massive difference towards your ability to compress the ball. So once you get used to that wider stance, you can play around with your ball position. You can lift those arms up into a good position in the backswing, start the downswing where you're rotating towards your lead side as your arms stay in front of you, and then coming in towards that hitting zone, staying within that gateway as you let your arms straighten is just going to make a world of difference, like it does for all students. So this drill will just really heighten your awareness for exactly what we're trying to look for in the golf swing. Let me know how you get on.